Okay, thank you very much. Then I would like to call to order this committee meeting of the Long-Term Care Redevelopment Planning Task Force of July 6, 2023. And first of all, may I ask if there is any declaration of pecuniary interest? Okay, and I see the hand up on Councillor Hutchinson. Oh, no, that was my hand. My cursor is doing strange things. Okay, thank you. So I do not see any hands up for that item. Excellent. So that allows us to move into our delegations, and the material was included in the package that was revised on July 4th. So we all have that in front of us. Thank you very much for getting that to us in advance. It always helps for questions. And so with that, then just before I hand it over to Mr. Rodriguez and the team that is here and Ms. Wilson, is there anything that staff would like to introduce before we get started there?
Through you, Ms. Chair, I think that we are able to just turn it over to Andrew and colleagues to take us through the project update. Thank you for checking.
Excellent. Okay, so I do see Mr. Rodriguez. I do see you. Do you have members with you, other members with you today, or are you?
So good afternoon. There's one participant that I just received a text message about 30 seconds ago, Deborah Wadsworth. And Sarah, I believe she reached out to you for a link.
I will send it to her right now. Thank you.
Perfect. But I have the main presentation and I'm able to get started.
Okay, excellent. And I imagine our deputy clerk is going to help you with sharing that presentation material, or are you?
Yeah, I'm able to pull it up over here. No problem.
Okay, perfect.
Okay, can everyone see?
Yep. Yes, and now I will have a hard time keeping track of hands, but if there are hands that come up along the way, we'll try to address the question right then, but we can also just make notes and wait until you finish with your slide presentation.
Okay, excellent. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for the opportunity for us to provide an update in terms of what we've been focusing on over the past few weeks, more specifically with the value engineering initiatives and what our proposed next steps are, given the stage of the project. I'll provide a brief update just in terms of what we've been focusing on, what our next steps in relation to value engineering and what the results are. I'll present a high-level summary in terms of what savings have been found or forecasted as a result of value engineering. I'll spend some time talking about the next steps and key upcoming decisions from the task force, and then I'll hand over to Mary Lou in terms of presenting the financial analysis results to the task force. And then there's a question period at the end, but certainly happy to answer any questions as they may arise throughout the presentation. From a general update and planning perspective, we've been working actively with the design team, with members from Rockwood Terrace, just to go through the value engineering and looking at cost savings opportunities. It has been an iterative process where we've worked through and really wanted to test each of those items to make sure that from an operational perspective, we've had a chance to review them with Jennifer, with Karen and the team to make sure what's being proposed would be functional with the way that Rockwood Terrace is intending to operate. We've also been working with the cost consultant, with various members of the design team and some consulting teams, just to make sure that the scope is accurate with where we have targeted savings. That has been the focus over the past few weeks, and we've received some numbers. We've been working with the cost consultant mostly over the month of June, and that's what's reflected in the presentation today and the numbers you'll see. Where we go from here is we're considering today's meeting as a key milestone or stage gate prior to informing the design team to resume with forthcoming activities. So where the project was on pause to identify savings through value engineering, when the team does receive some indication to resume, our next steps would be to re-engage with the Ministry of Long-Term Care, provide them an update with where we made modifications since the last submission went forward. We would be re-engaging with West Grey in terms of where we left off with our site plan application, looking for approval and setting up in anticipation of our building permit submission. We'd also be starting quite shortly. So we'd be looking to issue this in the month of July, the pre-qualification package for general contractors, with the goal to come back to the task force by the end of August with the recommended list of pre-qualified general contractors ahead of tender, and also some discussions to engage with Infrastructure Ontario to make sure that the next steps are well underway to get the financing agreements and letters to support upcoming ministry submissions. These are captured under the project phase that's shown as design activities, but this is a little bit more than design. It's design, financing, as well as early procurement and pre-qualification. So I just wanted to note that this was a very busy slide. So what I've described here is expanded slightly above design only. The other piece that we're actively working on is for the early works, the road construction, the preliminary grading. So we have a package that's under review right now, and the goal would be to go out to tender late this month, or at the latest, early August, and that will be to go out to tender for that chunk and complete that work prior to winter conditions. And that's what's shown under construction as the dashed line that would occur in 2023 before the main works would start in 2024 for the long-term care development project. So the main update on value engineering results is the last time we presented a total forecasted development cost in March. The number was 125.7 million. As a result of our value engineering activities, this forecast has now been revised to 96.7 million. So a number that's 29 million lower than what was presented in March. There's three main contributors that I'd like to speak about that resulted in these savings. One is the reduction in building gross square footage or area. And this was as a result of eliminating the assisted living on the third floor, as well as the village square component. So right now on the site, there's the long-term care component, which has the resident home areas and the long-term care core. This has also allowed the design team to optimize the location of the building on the site. So there were some questions during the last meeting about site development costs. And one of the constraints are based on site conditions. The further north the building was positioned on the site, the higher site development costs were associated. And this was strictly a function of site conditions and topography. So as a result of a smaller building size, we were able to optimize it on site, shift it further to the south. And this allowed for some savings in site development costs. There's also some additional areas on site that were available for stormwater management. So this allows us to include both stormwater management ponds on the site versus having to construct on the lands east of Rock Street. So all this would be factored within optimization of site development costs. And we've seen this number go down versus what was forecasted in March. And then the third one here, reduction in post-contract contingency. This is what we would call a percentage-driven cost, which is a percentage of construction cost that's assigned for any changes that would occur during construction. And this number went down consequently as a result of the construction cost forecast being reduced. As we move forward, there are further opportunities for cost and risk reduction. First one being with tendering for the early grading road and servicing work. So this will give us a fixed number to work with after it's been tendered versus a forecasted number that's carried in our budget. It will also reduce some of the execution risk by having this work complete ahead of the main general contractor mobilizing on site to work on the long-term care development piece. And then the second option identified here is for furniture, fixtures, and equipment, where right now we're carrying budgetary price, but based on our preliminary review with the Rockwood Terrace team, there are opportunities to have considerably lower unit rates for some of these pieces of equipment and furniture. And we also have the opportunity to review in more detail with the home what pieces of equipment may be transferred over that will be in good shape by the time the new home is built to move across versus fully procuring new. So from the budgetary standpoint right now, what we've reflected is a list of all new items, and that is built into our forecast of 96.7 million. In terms of key upcoming decisions from the task force, so we last month in June we talked about proceeding with the tender for the early grading road and servicing. works. Today, the focus is the financial results of the value engineering activities and the update on the financial implications as a result of this forecast. As I mentioned earlier, the next update, we expect to come back, assuming a favorable go from here from the task force and council, would be to come back with results of the pre-qualification and present them in the form of a memo for review and approval to the task force. Around September, we would expect to have the documentation ready for a capital work borrowing bylaw with Infrastructure Ontario. And the project would go out to tender at the earliest towards the end of October, early November. And our goal would be to close the tender, finalize the package for review to the task force and council, following which it would go to the Ministry of Long-Term Care to be in a position to award to the successful contractor before the Christmas break in December. At this point, I'd like to hand over to Mary Lou to go over the financial implications to Grey County, but I'm happy to pause and answer any questions if there are any so far in relation to next steps and decisions from task force schedule or costs that I've presented so far.
Okay, and so Director Spicer, did you want to hold off on that until we get to the actual task force report that you're presenting, or and just stick to what's here in the deputation? Does that make sense for flow?
Sorry, Madam Chair, if I could just interject, it's Tara here. Yeah, if we could proceed and finish off the presentation, and then we'll get a motion to receive the presentation for information, and then we can move to your report, Mary Lou.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
you.
So with that then, I did notice that Deborah Wadsworth is now online. So was there anything to add in terms of the presentation before I look for any questions from the task force? I see a shaking head.
No, nothing from me. Thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So with that, we'll go to the virtual hands as I see them. So we'll begin with Councillor Grigg.
Thanks, Andrea, and thanks, Andrew, this afternoon. I hope my audio is good. Just a couple points, and I'm just going to kind of preamble here for a moment. Andrew, I've sat through a couple meetings now as this project is attempting to move forward. And I find again today, the project as presented for cost does not contain much to inform of specific dollar estimates. There's not a lot of detailed breakdown. So if individuals in the public come forward and ask questions of me as a counselor or decision maker regarding the project, I unless I'm missing details that have been provided in the last 6 months, I'm a little bit at a loss to be able to explain where cost estimates are coming from for earthworks or foundation or interior build, moving costs, furniture, interior, etc. And I feel like I need better. I need to be better informed on a lot of these details. We're trying to advance it along, but I do have a responsibility to members in the public as their representative, and I need to be able to explain a project of this magnitude. We recently, a few years ago, went through a reconstruction of our city hall, and at a $8.6 million job, 6.6 approximate was construction, but I could explain to a resident every component of that 8.6, so storage, moving costs, etc. So I've got a few questions here, wondering if you can expand.
Councillor Grigg, before you go into further specifics, I would like to take a moment to allow CAO Wingrove to respond to your initial comment.
Okay.
Thanks, Madam Chair. And Councillor Grigg, I do apologize, but we did have some discussion about sort of the principles that we're adhering to with the previous council, but I certainly you were not party to those discussions. One of the things that is important to us at this time prior to going out to tender is that we are able to protect some information so as to ensure that we get the most competitive bids when we issue the tender in, you know, in the next few months. So if there are specific areas of concern, we can talk about the kind of work that is required, if that would be helpful to you, just to have a sense of the scope and the magnitude of the work. But what we won't be able to do at this stage is get into a detailed cost breakdown.
Okay,
Okay.
and I would like us to direct any of our questions or comments to Mr. Rodriguez in terms of what he's presented in the deputation, so we can receive the deputation and get into a more fulsome discussion about the finances when we get to the Director Spicer's report. So keeping that in mind, Councillor Greg, is there a follow-up?
So the first question is, what have been the valued engineering recommendations or strategies of the last 3 months? And I note that you've got main contributors of elimination of assisted living and village square components, but that is quite broad. And I'm just wondering if you can elaborate a little further on that. Secondly, I'm just wondering from a project management cost perspective, are project management costs still more closely aligned with a $55 million build or a $100 million build in terms of percentages, or did we kind of just work off of a base fee? And thirdly, what was estimated per foot construction costs of the assisted living in the village square and the total square footage? And then just provide that against what is the cost per square foot estimate now for the recommended constructed project going forward, as opposed to what it was previously.
Okay, thank you for those 3 outlined questions. So with that, I'll go over to Mr. Rodriguez for the comments that he'd like to make on those 3 questions.
Yeah, sure. So in terms of the assisted living in the village square, those ones were, I did explain them in broad strokes, but as an example, that has an implication by removing the assisted living on the structure, on the foundation design, on the some of the mechanical and electrical equipment and sizing. So while we did describe it in broad strokes earlier, it did require all disciplines to look at what the impacts were of removing those components from the overall campus of care. I did mention optimization of the location of the building on the site. So that required quite a lot of engagement between architectural and the civil designer to look at what that does to the cut and fill, what that does to stormwater management, where is the optimal location of stormwater management on the site, stormwater management ponds, excuse me. We had a lot of discussions about the access road, making sure that infrastructure provisions that were being put in initially would allow for further expansion and the long-term vision of what West Grey was looking to achieve. So those were some of the key activity or key areas that we looked at that led to savings. Some of the other items that we looked at were specific items like lighting, for example, in more detail, lighting controls, what type of lighting is being used within the long-term care home, access control. So we targeted specific disciplines and had dedicated meetings with the end users to look at, is there an opportunity to do things differently? Is there an opportunity to simplify? And if yes, then we'll articulate those specific items to the cost consultant. So we did this systematically. We developed a list of, I'm going to say, probably around 20, and correct me if I'm wrong, Debbie, but I think it was around 20 items. And those were, we worked back and forth with the cost consultant to build those into our revised cost estimate. So that's the first element. The second one, in terms of project management fees, we haven't made an adjustment to the forecast, but we do expect we'll be able to make one, given that the scope is less than the full campus of care. What we have to recognize is that, you know, where it's been a journey from where we started to 2 long-term care homes to 1 campus of care to now 1 long-term care home. So it's different than a journey of if it was a straight 128 build home. So I'm just adding that for context to say a campus of care compared to 128 beds is completely different, and our effort would be less as a result. However, it has been a journey to get to this point, and it's not necessarily reflective of a straight 128 build if we were starting today. So that number will go down relative to had it been a campus of care project. The third piece in terms of cost per square foot, I would have to get back to you in terms of what the assisted living in Village Square is. I can say that not $1 per square foot will not be the same for all of those areas. The Village Square would be less, the assisted living would be less than long-term care. So not every square foot would have had the same cost in the campus. But what we're forecasting now for the long-term care home for the building is around $500 per square foot in today's dollars. We add some additional costs on top of that for site works, for escalation to the midpoint of construction, as well as post-contract contingency. But if we look strictly at the base build in today's dollars, the cost consultant has estimated $500 per square foot.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, I would like to be able to open it to the floor to any other members of the task force that have questions. Okay, yes, Councillor Mackey, go ahead.
Thanks, Madam Chair. My question is directed to, I guess, Karen and Jennifer. I know the two of you and members of your team have spent a lot of time in the overall planning of this new facility, you know, to meet the requirements of our seniors, you know, infection control measures, quality of life measures. Has anything changed, Jennifer or Karen, in the overall design that would take away from all that work that was done previously?
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. I feel quite confident to say that no, there hasn't been a significant change in terms of those safety measures, the experience of the residents in the long-term care home in doing this value engineering exercise. With Andrew's support and Deborah's support and the team at Rockwood, we're able to do that review and still maintain those things that were important, that we had highlighted as being important from the residents' perspective and important from the team members' perspective.
Okay, thank you. All right, are there any other questions from members of the task force? Okay, so seeing no more further questions for this, yeah, I do like the habit of receiving the deputation, so I know it's not printed here in the agenda, but is there a mover who would like to, thank you. Councillor Hutchinson is moving that we receive the deputation and the materials that we have presented, and it is seconded by Warden Milne. Thank you. Any discussion? All in favor? And that is carried. Thank you very much. Let me just see that again. Could I just say all in favor, please? Show your hands. Okay, and any opposed? Okay, thank you. So Madam Deputy Clerk, did you record that? We had one opposed.
Through you, Madam Chair. Yes, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, so with that then, that allows us to move on to the next items of the agenda, which are in fact the reports. So we are going to begin with report FRP 1723, and that's the updated financial impact assessment of Rockwood Terrace project. And Mr. Rodriguez, I'm sure you're still online here, so I'll save my formal thank you for coming in and explaining, because I can see that you're still here. So I'd just like to move on to this portion of the meeting, and then we'll be able to close things off. Unless you need to go. Do you need to go, Mr. Rodriguez?
No, I was planning to stay.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Okay, so with that then I would like to then ask if Director Spicer would like to introduce the report.
Before I start, would you like someone to move the report?
Oh, right. That's right. That's how we do it here. Thank you. So can I ask if there is a mover for the recommendations that are printed in the report, that the report FRRP 1723 updated financial impact assessment Rockwood Terrace project be received, and that the long-term care redevelopment planning task force support the proceeding with the revised project scope and costing, and that council be asked to reconsider and revise the project upset limit to 96.7 million, and that the appropriate borrowing bylaw be prepared for council's consideration. Do I have a mover for that recommended motion? Thank you. Moved by Councillor McKay. Do I have a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Hutchinson. Thank you very much. Okay, so it is now on the floor for discussion. So with that, thank you very much. Director Spicer, over to you.
Thank you very much, Chair Matrosovs. This report provides an update to the report presented March 21st that examined the impact of the Class B estimate of 125.7 million. And as Andrews mentioned, that included the development of 128 long-term care beds, 40 assisted living beds, and a village square. And based on that project scope, it was estimated that $100 million in debt would be required to finance the build. When the report was presented to Committee of the Whole on March 23rd, the direction given to staff was to advise Colliers to amend the design and reduce the budget to an upset limit of 92 million. As Andrews indicated in his presentation, work has been done to revise the project scope, and the revised estimate is 96.7 million to develop 128 beds for long-term care. So this is within 5% of the target provided by council and a reduction of 23.1% from what was presented in March. So the recommendation to finance the project with a construction loan that is later converted to a 25-year debenture is unchanged. What has changed is the portion of ministry funding referred to as the construction fund subsidy. This would have provided 23.4 million in funding that would have reduced the amount borrowed. So the ministry required that in order to access this funding, construction needed to begin by the end of August. The numbers quoted in the report before you today assume that this funding will not be received. A delegation to discuss this funding has been requested for the AMO conference. Based on revised project costing, the estimate now for borrowing is 77.6 million as compared to the 108 million. This would require an annual debenture payment of 5,336,000 less the ministry funding of just over $1 million for a net levy payment of 4.33 million. These calculations are based on a 4 3/4 interest rate that results in 55.8 million in interest costs over the 25-year term of the debenture. Today's lending rates as a comparative, 25 years is 4.59% and a construction loan is 5.03%. June 23rd, just as another comparator, the rates were 4.7% and the construction interest was 5%. So you can see that things change daily. And the next rate that is to be released from the Bank of Canada is July 12th. If we wish to stay within the limits set out in the council approved debt management policy, which is to not exceed 10% of our own source revenue, less the debt that we already owe, after the annual debt repayment limit, this would leave slightly more than 2.9 million annually available for other projects that require debt financing. If interest rates were 4 3/4 and the term was also 25 years, that would allow a further $42.3 million to be borrowed for other county projects. In order to come up with the assumptions in this report, there's a number of variables that have been considered, such as the interest rates when the debentures are issued. We have a target time frame of 2026, and that will depend on the optimum time to borrow. So the difference between the construction loan interest and the debenture interest. And however, a construction loan only pays interest, while when we issue the debenture, we're going to pay principal and interest. The timing of cash flows to the contractors and for the work to be done, which in turn determines when construction loans will start and what those dollar values and interest are. It also assumes that the project will not exceed the $96.7 million estimate. Also assumed are the funds that are available from reserve and development charges. So the amount that we've shown as available from development charges as per the background study is 5.5 million. And given Bill 23 and the unknown impacts, will we collect this much for long-term care? And as a term of reference, at the end of 2022, just shy of $1 million had been collected for long-term care. The other big unknown is provincial funding. You know, the best scenario would be if the province announces the construction fund subsidy will be extended to projects that start after August 31st. And that certainly would be a beneficial factor in this project moving forward. And to provide other available funds for projects and reduce the amount that we're borrowing for this one. So the next step is pending support for the recommendation before you and support from council next week. The next step would be to proceed with a borrowing application with Infrastructure Ontario. Part of the application process includes a requirement for council to pass a borrowing bylaw. Staff would need to begin working on the application and get the bylaw to Infrastructure Ontario for their consideration. Earlier this year, we were advised that once they have the application, the process takes several months based on the dollar value of what we're requesting to borrow. The 2024 budget will require an increase to the levy requirement. So the levy requirement, as a reminder, is currently $1,361,000. In order to begin building up to the estimated net levy of 4.33 million required in 2026, and prior to 2026, those amounts will be used to fund the construction loan interest. Monitoring costs, revising estimates, and assumptions will be an ongoing process throughout this project. And as we have to keep checking our assumptions and costing estimates. And with that, I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you. And as we eagerly hope for that we'll receive a delegation for AMO in August, are we aware of other municipalities that are in the same boat that are going to be coming to the province as well, saying, could you please extend this August deadline because of X, Y, or Z on our particular projects? Do we know if we're alone or if there are others that are experiencing this? Perhaps CA Wingrove, do you have any insight on that?
I do not. I have not had that communication. I think as was mentioned some time ago, we've only ever been encouraged to keep going forward from the province, from our project manager to our local elected officials. Everyone has just been united around that message of keep going and keep us informed. And that's what we've been doing. I don't know. Perhaps Andrew does.
Right. Okay, so with that, then let me open it to the floor for questions and comments from the task force. So we'll begin with Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Too many buttons. Just to follow up on your question to Jennifer, as we are a member of Advantage Ontario, I think if we could come at the ministry from a cooperative of Advantage Ontario to have this extension of the building subsidy. Just wondering what your thoughts are on lobbying Advantage Ontario, because I'm sure there are a lot of other municipalities and nonprofits that are looking at redevelopment and could really use these these provincial funds.
So, yep. I see a hand up for Mr. Rodriguez. We'll go to him first.
Yeah, I just want to add to my knowledge and based on our group's expertise working with other firms and operators, I am aware that they are working through Advantage Ontario just to group together and set up meetings to look at an extension. So I just wanted to add that I think that's certainly feasible and we're seeing that occurring right now.
Okay, thank you. And Warden Milne?
I just wanted to build on Kim's comments there. I've had a couple of conversations with our local MPP, and certainly the message that I'm getting, or we're getting, is that, yeah, keep going. This is something that's actively being considered, and yeah, we need to proceed. So, I mean, I'm getting a good sense from that, but who knows? Nobody's committed anything, so.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions to that, comments to that question? Okay, so with that, are there other questions from members of the task force regarding this report and the motion that we have on the floor? Okay, and Councillor Greg.
I will just call for a recorded vote on this motion. I'm not comfortable advancing at this time. $42 million on a go forward is a very small window as it pertains to the county as a whole. And I'd be more comfortable after we have our deputation with the ministry in August at AMO. I would have the expectation that the province will extend this. They've already budgeted these dollars in the current year, so this isn't unbudgeted dollars on their part. So I'm comfortable with probably advocating that this gets extended, but to place a vote of support for the motion as it is, I'm not comfortable with that today. So just asking for a recorded vote. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Other questions and comments? We'll go to Warden Milne. Just make sure you're unmuted.
Yep, that's always a good thing to do, isn't it? Sorry about that. I just wonder if Kim could speak a little more to, because we have, as a council, approved an upset limit of 92 million. Now we're seeing 96.7. Perhaps Kim could talk a little more to how that can be surmounted or how that could work, please.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Warden. We have a number of, as Andrew mentioned, we do have some work that we think we can continue to do as far as rationalizing furniture, fixtures and equipment. So we believe there is some savings there. The early works tender, which is coming up shortly, certainly our hope is that a local company with local expertise will be able to provide a more competitive price than what the likely very conservative pricing is that the cost consultants have provided to do the early site works. So our hope is that we will see some cost savings compared to what we're carrying for that site. If we've done all of our homework as we hope we have, we should get good numbers back from that.
Most excellent. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Now, what kind of timeline would that be then, CEO Wingrove, before we would know?
Right. So we want to have, if we can, have that tender out as quickly as we can. It needs to be out for a month. My hope was that we would be able to come back and speak to those tender results towards the end of August. In the original report, when we talked about early works, we had wanted to set it up so that the proponent could begin their work as early in September as possible. Again, wanting that to be, part of the good story that we could tell at AMO and to the province that we were very close to meeting their getting started deadline of the end of August.
Okay. Thank you. And are there other questions from members of the task force or comments? Okay, if there are no final questions or comments, we did have a request that this is a recorded vote. So Madam Deputy Clerk, then I think we are ready to call for that vote. Did you want to do that asking each individual, or how do you want to do that as a recorded vote?
Through you, Madam Chair, if it is your preference and your comfort level, I am happy to move through the roll call and just because I have it in front of me and confirm the votes by that method.
Okay.
Through you as well, Madam Chair, just a reminder that recorded votes in committee are not weighted votes. So they are one vote per party.
Okay, thank you.
So to begin, Councillor Gregg,
Opposed?
Councillor McQueen,
Support.
Councillor Mackey,
In favor?
Councillor McKay,
Support.
Councillor Hutchinson,
In favor.
Warden Milne,
In favor.
and Chair Matrosovs.
In favor.
Through you, Madam Chair, that vote has carried on a recorded vote.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, that allows us to move on to the second of our reports, which is CAORRP 09 of 23, authorizing land-related acquisitions for Rockwood Terrace early works. And it's recommended that the report be received and that staff be authorized to negotiate the acquisition of interests in the land necessary to carry out the early road and servicing works for Rockwood Terrace redevelopment described in the report, including a temporary stormwater drainage easement with respect to drainage from the west extent of the redevelopment parcel substantially in the form of the illustrated figure attached in the report, and B, ownership, in yes, that's right, in that same report, and B, ownership of a portion of the existing Rock Street turning bulb comprising the northeast corner of the redevelopment site and consisting of land legally described as part lot. I think that should be part of part lot. Lot 11 north and of South Street East. Geographic town of Durham, now in the municipality of West Grey, County of Grey, and depicted as Part 1 on the reference plan 17R-1602. That any agreement to acquire such interests be in the form of be in a form acceptable to the Director of Legal Services, the county solicitor, and conditional on final acceptance of county council, and that staff bring forward such bylaws for the consideration of county council as may be necessary to approve and complete the acquisitions. So with that, then I'll ask then if we have a mover for that recommended motion. Okay, moved by Warden Milne, seconded by Councillor Mackey. Thank you. It's now on the floor for discussion. And so with that, we can move on to an introduction. And Deputy CEO Schertzer, are you going to be doing the introduction of this?
Yes, I am. Thank you very much, Chair Matrosovs, and good afternoon, everyone. So this report is further to the report that we presented at the last task force meeting regarding the early road and servicing works for the redevelopment of Rockwood Terrace. Some of the early works require the county to acquire interests in land. So there are two acquisitions that are required. One is a temporary drainage easement to the lands to the south, and the second is a small amount of land expected to be surplus at the end of Rock Street. And it's expected to be surplus once the reconfiguration of Rock Street happens, when that's a through street. So the recommendation in this report would be providing formal authorization for staff to proceed to arrange the acquisitions in accordance with the sale and acquisition of land policy and procedure. So just provide a bit more detail in terms of the two acquisitions. So the first is the temporary drainage easement, and I mentioned this as part of the previous report of the last task force. So this is a temporary drainage easement. The current concept plan for the new Rockwood Terrace, I'll just share my screen showing you approximate location for that. It's just the map that's in the report. 1 second here. Okay. Can everyone see that?
Yes, thank you.
So the current concept plan for the new Rockwood Terrace requires stormwater to drain via storm sewers that would flow westerly under South Street East. So as you can see in the map, there's a proposed pond that's going to be located roughly in this location here and be the northwest corner of the subject lands. And so a drainage outlet would be required where this green dash line is shown approximately, and would go across Street East and would outlet on the lands to the south. So that's where roughly the location of the drainage easement is required. We are going to be installing, as part of the early works, some storm drains that would allow for future connections further to the west along South Street East. Right now, there's capacity challenges at the existing connections. So once those connections have been upgraded, and West Grey is currently reviewing and working on these as we speak, once those are upgraded, then this pipe can be activated, and then the drainage easement can go away. So these pipes can then connect up, and then the drain can then properly outlet to the storm drains that are further to the west here. But until that time, this temporary drainage easement is required. So we've had some initial discussions with the previous with that landowner. They're generally supportive of the drainage easement. They would like to obviously see the final plans for what those drainage works will look like, which we expect very soon to be received from the county's engineering consultant. And then we'll be able to share that and finalize the agreement. So again, this recommendation is to just provide the formal authorization for staff to proceed with the acquisitions and the negotiations for those acquisitions. We would then bring back the final agreements to council for final approval. So that's the first acquisition that's required. The second acquisition involves land, and I'll just pull up the map here. It involves lands that are at the end of the existing Rock Street. So currently Rock Street extends south of Sadler Street and ends at a turning bulb, which is located at the northeast corner of the new Rockwood Terrace site. So just looking at this map, this area in here is approximately the location of the northeast corner of the future Rockwood Terrace site. Here's Sadler Street. The existing Rockwood Terrace is on these lands here. And this is where Rock Street currently extends down and ends in a turning bulb at this location here. So once Rock Street has been reconfigured, so Rock Street is going to be extended all the way south to connect to the new South Street East extension. So once that's been reconfigured, this turning bulb will no longer be required. So essentially be surplus to West Grey. West Grey has previously committed to transferring this land to the county. So it's just a matter of going through the final steps to declare those lands surplus and to transfer the lands to the county. So there will be some, as part of the servicing works, and there will be connections of storm drains, etc., as part of the early works. So that will all occur within parts of these lands. So the part of the then agreement with West Grey will be dealing with the transfer of that part one of those lands to the county. So those are the two acquisitions. In terms of costs, there could be some costs related to survey costs, as well as costs to prepare any legal and land transfer documents. And these costs can all be funded from the redevelopment reserve. So at this stage, staff are recommending that we be authorized to proceed to arrange the acquisitions for A, for the temporary drainage easement, and B, for the portion of the current Rock Street turning bulb. And as I mentioned, once finalized, the formal agreements will be prepared and brought forward to County Council for final approval. And be happy to take any questions. I'll stop sharing my screen.
Yes, thank you. So thank you for that. Okay, so there are those two items in question in this report then. And questions from the task force. Warden Mill.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Randy, any indication of a cost to the county for that land bulb on Rock Street over and above, the transfer costs? I know West Grey has been a very good partner in this whole process. So I would hope that there might be a minimal cost for that chunk of ground.
Yes, West Grey has been fantastic to deal with respect to this project.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but they've been good.
At this stage, there's been no cost indicated for those lands.
Excellent. Well, I'll buy the mayor a coffee.
Obviously, at this stage, we also have to work out some of the cost sharing with respect to the early works and servicing. So that could be part of the overall discussions as it relates to that. But at this stage, there's been no indication of costs as it relates to that portion of that property.
Very good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thank you. And any other questions or comments? Councillor Greg.
Just a quick question through Chair. Is this just clearing something up from the purchase of the property and not realizing that West Gray owned lands that are somewhat irregular to a municipal right of way? Just found it kind of odd that we require that land at this point, and it's not something just contained within the municipal right of way that we're going to pass back over afterwards.
For you, Chair, this actually was previously identified. We were aware that this portion of the property would have to be transferred at some point. So this is just going through the formal steps and the formal process to finalize the pieces, so to speak. West Gray, we put forward a request to West Gray. I want to say it was early last year, and West Gray Council dealt with it as part of their council meetings. I think July 2022. Just to say that they're supportive of transferring these lands. So this was known right from the get-go. So now we're just finalizing the pieces in terms of getting this in place so that we're not having to deal with it at a later date.
Okay, thank you. CAO Wingrove.
And just to follow on to that, the original property acquisition was not with the municipality of West Gray. It was with a private property owner. So this piece was outside of that parcel.
Correct.
Okay, thank you. And next we'll go over to Councillor Mackey.
Thanks, Madam Chair. Thanks for the report, Randy. I just want to make sure that the committee, our idea of minimal and yours are the same. So are you estimating that this is under $10,000, or, you know, if it's survey cost and land transfer costs, is that what we can anticipate?
Yeah, we anticipate it'll be under 10 total cost for preparing the documents. We're gonna prepare as many of the documents as we can in-house in terms of any of the legal documents, any of the transfer documents. So that'll be prepared mostly in-house. Mostly the cost will be with respect to any survey that will be required. For the turning bulb lands, we're hoping to utilize the existing plans that are shown in that report because it's already properly identifying that Part 1 reference. So I think that's not required. Once we have some final details about what's required as it relates to the drainage easement, that is where we might have to formally survey those lands, depending on the nature of the drainage easements and the works that are required there. So there could be some survey costs associated with that, but that's the bulk of the cost that we anticipate. We anticipate that being less than 10,000.
Thanks, Randy.
No worries.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Okay, well, with that, then it looks like, Madam Deputy Clerk, we are ready to call this vote. There has been no request for recorded, so we can do that with a show of hands. So I'll now ask all those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Any opposed? Okay, and that is carried unanimously, Madam Deputy Clerk. Okay, thank you very much for that. So now that would allow us then to go into closed meeting. So, Madam Deputy Clerk.
Through you, Madam Chair. This closed resolution was added to the agenda if it was required when considering some of the earlier items. So as they have been, if the committee is satisfied, I would defer to you on proceeding without.
Okay, so I will ask then members of the task force, is there anybody that wishes to have any further discussion that would qualify as needing to be in closed session? Okay, so I am seeing and hearing none, so we can dispense with that provision. Thank you very much. And that allows us to go on to correspondence. However, we don't have any. We did not add any new items. So there is no other business, and we will do a to be determined date. And Madam Deputy Clerk, did I hear a date was being floated later this month in July? Is that for this one or is it for another committee?
Through you, Madam Chair, I believe that is for another committee.
Okay, all right. So we do not have a specific date in mind to put into our calendars just yet. Okay, thank you very much. And so that would be, now we will be looking for a motion to adjourn at 3:26 p.m. Thank you. Moved by Councillor McQueen, seconded by Councillor McKay. Any discussion? All in favor? Motion adjourned, and thank you. I thank you very much, Mr. Rodriguez, and your team for assisting us today by presenting the delegation. So thank you very much, everyone. And I have checked the weather. It looks like we're going to have good weather for tomorrow. River Mills Golf
Thank you
Tournament.
all. See you tomorrow.
See you tomorrow, everyone. Bye.
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 Bye, thanks.